on her mind until it found her.
She was a shoulder for him to cry on. They had a spark.
My sister was like, hey, I have a new boyfriend and I want y'all to meet him.
She felt like he might have been the one.
But when she goes missing, could he be to blame?
He was away during the time of the murder.
I knew it was something really, really wrong.
A trail of clues leads police to a disturbing crime scene.
There's blood everywhere.
It was horrific. I couldn't breathe.
Life went upside down.
And the unbelievable con that ended up in murder.
It was like, wow, are you serious?
He was supposed to be in prison.
She fought to keep her life from ending.
It gives me chills all these years later.
February 4th, 1995. It's a typical Saturday in Tulsa, a city of 375,000 in the heart of Oklahoma oil country.
Tulsa is, I think, probably one of the jewels of Oklahoma. It's a great city. You have all the arts and entertainment, restaurants, good bars to go to.
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad when you say that you're from Tulsa because there's a lot of crime that happens here.
I would say it's a safe community, but I would say per capita, we have a high homicide rate. I've grappled with it my whole career.
So when local resident Maxine Thomas makes a call to Tulsa police in the middle of the night, they're prepared to spring into action.
Tulsa Police, how can I help you?
Yes, I need to file a missing persons report.
Maxine says her friend Sharonda Clark has disappeared. No one has seen or heard from Sharonda in over 12 hours.
Maxine says the 20-year-old mother of two had failed to pick her children up from daycare earlier that evening.
Sharonda had a 4-year-old daughter and a 1.5-year-old daughter, and they were at the daycare, and she didn't go to pick them up as normal.
She always picks her kids up after work. There's no way she would have left them there without telling anyone.
That day, it just kept getting later and later, and slowly the daycare emptied. It was just myself, my sister, and the workers for the daycare. They were calling, but no one was coming or picking up.
Since Maxine was listed as an emergency contact, she was able to step in for Sharonda's two girls.
Fortunately, she was able to come and get them.
I picked up the girls. We went to Sharonda's to look for her.
We go and knock on the door to see if we could get my mom to answer, but no one answered. That was a really, really big flag for myself at the age of 4.
She's a good mom. She wouldn't just abandon her kids like this.
That wasn't like Sharonda to not communicate.
She never, ever, ever done that.
Sharonda was the type of mother who would stop whatever she was doing to make sure that her kids are okay.
Something must have happened to her. That's the only thing I can think of.
Okay, we're going to send 2 units out to that location.
My mom was very, very active with myself and my sister. She was that parent, so I knew it was something really, really wrong.
They were worried about what could be happening to Sharonda.
For 20-year-old Sharonda Clark, motherhood began at a young age.
She was 14 when she first became a mom.
Of course, my grandparents didn't want her to become a teen parent, but she did. I'm her oldest, and she was her mom's oldest as well. So in a lot of ways, we were a lot alike. Her being brand new to parenting, me being brand new.
She loved her daughter, Ye-Shin. She did. She really did. She stopped school to take care of her baby, and so she did odd jobs until she was old enough to work at a real job. The father was real young, too. He was about 15. So it was hard.
However, Sharonda's friends and family rallied around her to help.
We always kicked in and made sure that she had diapers. We worked together to do the best that she could for her daughter. It takes a village. That's all I can say.
Do you need me to still watch her tomorrow?
Oh, yes, that would be amazing. You know, she loves her Auntie Jamaica.
I love her too.
I know.
In the spring of 1992, Sharonda became pregnant again, this time with her daughter, Majorine.
I was 12 when Majorine was born, and it was just like having another little sister, little sibling.
She loved that little baby, oh my goodness. She was always smiling, always smiling.
Majorine's father was a man from the neighborhood, Travis Wells.
How's she doing?
Good. I think she's about to fall asleep.
My mom and my daddy were crazy. Crazy about each other.
So much so that they decided to tie the knot right after Majorine was born.
She was a young married mom, so she experienced not only being a teenage mom, but she also experienced being a teen wife.
She was still really young, but she made good decisions and strong decisions, and there was nobody that was gonna tell her different.
She loves the family she's built.
But unfortunately, just 1 year into the marriage, it began to crumble.
They just began to grow apart, which could happen in any marriage, especially when you start a marriage so young.
That relationship didn't work out.
They ended up separating when Sharonda was 19 years old.
But Sharonda didn't let such a jarring life change get her down.
Sharonda continued to do whatever it took to provide for her 2 children. She worked multiple jobs. She became a manager of a retail chain.
She, with 2 young children, found her own place. She paid her own bills.
Sharonda was a fighter.
She fought for us no matter what. Do anything for us that she could to try to protect us.
As a single mom, Sharonda's busy life didn't leave much time for romance. But later that same year, she'd find a connection in a place she least expected it.
Hey, you okay?
Initially, Sharonda had met Jermaine at his brother's funeral, and being the caring kind of person that she was a shoulder for him to cry on.
I just can't believe he's gone. It's like it hasn't sunk in yet.
23-year-old Jermaine Cannon welcomed Sharonda's compassionate spirit with open arms.
That's how they started communicating. Just to have somebody to talk to laugh with, because she was so funny. And you know, just to give him a head change.
I bet he's looking large up there, though.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Sharonda was a light to everyone who met her, including Jermaine.
Before long, their friendship turned into a romance, a relationship that Sharonda was hopeful would finally be the one.
My sister called up to my parents and was like, hey, I have a new boyfriend and I want y'all to meet him.
She was taking things slowly, but her heart was open.
However, it's been more than 12 hours since anyone has seen or heard from Sharonda, and fears are mounting that something terrible may have happened to her.
Sharonda Clark is missing.
She hadn't picked up her kids from daycare.
That wasn't like Sharonda to not communicate.
All right, thank you.
A missing persons report is filed.
Tulsa police begin their investigation by heading to Sharonda's apartment.
The police basically broke in the door.
Police!
When police got inside, they found overturned furniture, spilled food, and bloody walls, indicating a struggle that took place.
There's blood in the kitchen, there's blood in the living room, there's shoe marks of blood all over.
But nothing could prepare police for what they find when they look into the hallway.
They witness a horrendous scene.
There was so much blood.
She didn't deserve this.
After separating from her husband, Travis Wells, 20-year-old mother of two, Sharonda Clark, had come out on the other side even stronger.
Sharonda was headed in the right direction.
She was willing to do whatever it takes to provide for her two children.
She made sure that we were always together. Working, tending to us, maintaining friendships, nothing seemed to stop her.
And when she met 23-year-old Jermaine Cannon at the most unlikely of places, it seemed as if she might get another chance at love.
She wound up finding someone who respected and appreciated and loved her.
But in February of 1995, as Valentine's Day approaches, police have discovered a bloody scene inside Sharonda's apartment.
As police were investigating the scene, they noticed a trail of blood leading into the hallway. And when they followed it, they witnessed an even more grisly scene.
They saw the victim laying on the floor, on her back.
Sharonda Clark was dead.
The responding officers immediately called for backup.
I was on call that specific day and night, and you always know when your pager goes off, we still carried pagers then, that you were ready to go. I mean, it was just expected that you were going to have to get out and see something that you really didn't want to see.
When Detective Fultz arrives on the scene, it's clear he's looking at a homicide.
We started looking at the victim and noticed quite a few stab marks on her body.
Someone stabbed her 3 times in the neck region, which severed her carotid artery, her jugular, and then the final blow was a stab wound to the chest.
Apart from those fatal blows, Sharonda also suffered numerous smaller cuts to her hands and arms.
She had what's called defensive wounds. You can imagine a knife coming down on you and she's got her hand up in the air trying to protect herself.
I certainly believe that she did everything she could to keep her life from ending. She fought, she struggled.
Near Sharonda's body, investigators find what they believe is the murder weapon.
The knife was found fairly close to the body. The handle was broken. It was very bloody.
They bag it up for further examination.
Police find more signs of violence inside Sharonda's bedroom.
They found a trail of blood leading to the bedroom.
In the bedroom, everything was in disarray.
There's blood everywhere and spatter on the walls.
It was apparent from looking at the blood stains and the blood trails that the majority of violence and the stabbing occurred in the bedroom. Our suspect had stabbed the victim numerous times and then dragged her from the bedroom into the hallway.
There's something else in the bedroom that catches investigators' attention.
There was a broken window in the bedroom.
At first glance, it appears to be a robbery. But when police further investigate, they find the window had been broken from the inside.
It looks like the window was broken when Sharonda was struggling against her killer.
Other evidence also runs counter to the robbery theory.
There's no signs of forced entry. Nothing appears to be missing.
It looked like Sharonda had let this person into the house.
Someone that uses a knife when it's up close like this, it's extremely personal. It shows me as an investigator that this person had absolutely no regard but rage toward our victim.
When the tragic news reaches Sharonda's loved ones, they're devastated.
I've seen my dad cry, but not like that. My first thought was, why did this happen? How could this happen to our family?
I couldn't breathe. It was devastating for something like that extreme to happen to somebody that you love so much.
You hear mom's gone, mom's not coming back. Almost immediately, life went upside down.
As the sun comes up over Tulsa, investigators start canvassing the apartment complex for potential witnesses.
Investigators reached out to neighbors to see if they had seen anything.
One woman tells police she was friendly with Sharonda, and the young mother was well-liked among the other residents at the apartment complex.
She got along with everybody. People loved to hang out with her.
But Sharonda's neighbor also says she noticed something unusual on Friday afternoon, the day Sharonda disappeared.
I was coming home from the store earlier, and I saw her outside talking to somebody.
According to the neighbor, the two appeared to be in a heated exchange, some type of argument.
They were really going at it, and I can tell she was pretty upset.
To police, it looks like this person could be Sharonda's killer.
Get away from me!
Thanks to one of Sharonda Clark's neighbors, Tulsa detectives have learned that the mother of two was spotted arguing with an unidentified man on the afternoon before her death.
Did you hear what they were arguing about?
No, they were too far away, but it looked pretty heated.
She didn't know the cause of the argument.
But she was worried about Sharonda, and so later on that night, she gave her a call.
She called about 5:30 p.m.
The phone rang, and then somebody finally answered, but it wasn't Sharonda.
Hello? It's a man. The neighbor believes it was the same man who was arguing with Sharonda that day.
Hi, may I please speak to Sharonda?
Yeah, Sharonda's not here right now.
He was telling her that Sharonda was not there, but she could hear Sharonda in the background, and then he ended up hanging up on her. And that was probably the last time anybody heard Sharonda alive.
Detectives are hoping her neighbor can help them identify Sharonda's mysterious male companion.
Investigators asked the neighbor if she could recognize him, if she knew what he looked like, what he was wearing.
But they're out of luck.
I saw them from pretty far away, so I really couldn't get a very good look at them.
All that she could recall was that he was a black man in his 20s.
Thank you for your time, man.
Tracking down this new suspect is now investigators' #1 priority.
Sharonda recently separated from her ex-husband, Travis Wells.
Could he be the person she was arguing with that day?
In cases like this, police usually start their investigation with those closest to the victim or anyone they've recently had a disagreement with.
However, it's soon clear Sharonda and her ex didn't have any bad blood.
They were still on amicable terms, that they had exchanged and arranged visitation for their child.
They both got along with one another and were co-parenting and being able to communicate with each other.
After their separation, Travis hadn't even stayed in Tulsa.
Majorene's dad, he moved to Ohio and didn't come back.
He was away during the time of the murder.
Without Travis Wells as a suspect, detectives are back at square one.
Next, investigators subpoena Sharonda's phone records and her bank records, hoping to find something that will give them a clue to what happened.
As detectives pore over the records, they're looking for anything that might raise a red flag.
They looked through all of her recent communications and transactions, but nothing stood out.
They come up empty.
Forensic testing on the murder weapon also leads to a dead end.
They were hoping to recover some fingerprints from the knife, but there was nothing there.
Less than 24 hours into their murder investigation, detectives are already running out of leads. But when they start reaching out to Sharonda's circle of friends, they finally make some headway.
one of Sharonda's friends tells them that she knows of a man Sharonda had been seeing.
Yeah. She met this guy at the funeral for his brother. His name is Jermaine Cannon.
The two of them really hit it off, and Sharonda seemed happy.
However, Sharonda's romance with Jermaine soon hit a roadblock.
One day, Jermaine was just gone.
She told me he took off. She didn't know where he went or what happened to him.
She kind of felt like he might have been the one. Then he disappeared.
She was devastated. She had opened her heart up to someone. Had she missed something?
However, in January of 1995, Jermaine reappeared.
Out of nowhere, Jermaine landed back on her doorstep. Sharonda was shocked.
Did you miss me?
Jermaine? What are you doing here?
Sharonda was happy to see him.
But she was also hesitant to let Jermaine back into her life.
She couldn't rid her mind of those questions. What happened? Why did he leave?
It's been months, Jermaine. Where have you been?
He said, I had to go out of town to take care of some family stuff. He kind of dodged the question, and then he asked Sharonda if he could stay with her.
Why didn't you just let me know where you were going? You just up and left.
I'm sorry, baby. It all happened so fast, but I'm here now. We can be together again.
I don't think she was really comfortable with it, but she said he could stay. He didn't have any place else to go.
She still wanted to carry on this relationship. She just loved him unconditionally.
But after Jermaine moved in, Sharonda quickly came to regret her decision.
She didn't feel like he was being totally honest with her.
Sharonda was probably pulling away from the relationship, and that's when the aggression started.
Jermaine turned violent.
They were fighting. People were starting to notice bruises on Sharonda.
And as the tensions grew, Sharonda confronted Jermaine over his lies.
What do you want?
I want to know where you've been all these months. And I want the truth this time.
Fine, okay? You really want to know?
She found out that he was escaped from jail.
He was a wanted man.
Police in Tulsa, Oklahoma have been trying to identify the man Sharonda Clarke was seen arguing with on the day before her body was found.
A neighbor reported seeing Sharonda having an intense argument outside of her apartment with a young black male.
Now, thanks to one of Sharonda's close friends, police think they know who that man was. 23-year-old Jermaine Cannon.
According to the friend, Jermaine and Sharonda had a tumultuous relationship.
A relationship that became even more turbulent after Sharonda learned the truth about her new beau.
I want to know where you've been all these months. And I want the truth this time.
Fine. You really want to know?
Jermaine had been in prison.
What do you mean prison?
I mean, I got locked up, but then I got away.
On the day that he showed up at her door, he'd escaped. The news just shocked Sharonda.
When she told me that, I knew he was bad news. I told her she needed to get away from him.
Sharonda wholeheartedly agreed.
If she knew what had occurred as far as him being an escapee, I really don't have any doubt that she wouldn't have let him in her apartment.
She knew she couldn't have that around her children.
Now, do you have any recollection of Jermaine?
Here and there, like glimpses of him coming in, not really knowing who he was, you know, being a kid asking, who is this, who's staying over, that kind of thing. So it wasn't like, oh, he had been here for a long time.
In the days before she was killed, friends believe Sharonda had been making plans to remove Jermaine from her apartment and her life for good.
She was preparing to kick him out.
One day, Sharonda called her friend, asking if she could watch her children because she was worried about them being in the house.
Sharonda had called my mother and told her that I needed to get a hold of her ASAP. So I called her phone, but I didn't get any answer from her. I was a little concerned, but I wasn't really too stressed about it because I wasn't sure exactly what she wanted.
Sharonda made these calls. On the same day, the neighbors saw her arguing with the man outside.
For detectives, the picture of what happened to Sharonda is becoming clearer.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming down.
So now detectives are starting to put this puzzle together. They think what the neighbors saw was Sharonda kicking Jermaine out of her apartment.
When detectives run a background check on Jermaine, they're able to confirm much of what Sharonda's friends have told them.
We determined that Mr. Cannon has had a history of being violent toward women.
Police came across an incident report involving a woman who claimed that Jermaine had burglarized and assaulted her.
He snuck in through a basement window, and she woke up with his hand over her mouth.
A more recent arrest suggests that Jermaine's pattern of violence has been escalating.
The second woman, a former girlfriend, he ended up getting into an argument with her and tried to kill her by using an iron, a toaster, and a hammer, and left her for dead.
She was very fortunate not to have been killed.
He got prosecuted for an assault and battery with intent to kill and got 15 years.
But Jermaine wasn't behind bars for long.
They quickly learned that he had indeed escaped prison.
It was a medium security type facility where they had some freedom. They weren't locked down all the time.
And for whatever reason, he got it in his head that I've had enough of this being incarcerated.
He stole a bus and made his way to Tulsa.
Now, detectives are more determined than ever to track down Jermaine. But that proves easier said than done.
No one has seen him since the day before Sharonda's disappearance.
However, their luck changes when police receive intel from an unexpected source.
The lead detective gets a call. A woman claims to have information about Sharonda's case.
Yes. Is this the detective who's looking for Jermaine Cannon?
Yes, ma'am.
The caller is Jermaine's mother.
She knew her son was in trouble.
She put the pieces together.
Police in Tulsa, Oklahoma have discovered that just a few weeks before she was killed, Sharonda Clark had been tricked into welcoming an escaped convict into her home.
I was in prison.
Jermaine Cannon stole a truck, ended up in Tulsa, and she was just trying to help him out.
Now investigators are searching for the suspected killer, and they've just received a promising lead on his whereabouts.
Yes, ma'am.
They received a phone call from Jermaine's mother. She tipped them off that he had gone to Flint, Michigan.
So you're saying he's in Flint right now?
Yes, sir.
And how do you know this?
He told me himself.
She tells investigators that Jermaine called her, and it surprised her because she knew he was supposed to be in prison.
Somehow or other, he had gotten out of prison. And he said that he was about to take a bus to Flint.
Why Flint?
That's where his uncle is.
Jermaine also told his mother the police were after him for something he didn't do.
That something was the murder of Sharonda Clark.
Jermaine told his mother that he did get in a fight with Sharonda, but it wasn't what it looked like. He insisted on that.
The family didn't want to believe that Jermaine would do this, but they also understood that it was very likely that he had. Given his actions, the fact that he had been staying there, the fact that he had escaped from prison.
I told him to turn himself in, but he wouldn't listen to me.
Okay, thank you.
After speaking with Jermaine's mother, Tulsa detectives immediately reach out to law enforcement in Michigan.
They contacted the Flint Police Department and were arranging to have Jermaine arrested at his uncle's house.
But before they can make their move, investigators receive another surprising phone call.
Jermaine actually called Detective Fultz.
He called me. Pretty unusual for a suspect to voluntarily call, but his family had convinced him that it would be in his best interest.
Jermaine tells investigators he knows what the crime scene looks like. He knows how bad it is, but he wants them to give him a chance to tell his side of the story.
Within hours, Jermaine turns himself over to law enforcement.
Investigators explain to Jermaine that they already know he escaped from prison. They ask him to start from there.
Jermaine says once he made his escape, he headed straight for Sharonda's apartment.
He went to Sharonda because they had a spark before he'd gone to prison.
Look, I needed some place to go where I thought the cops wouldn't find me. And I thought that maybe she would let me stay with her.
Jermaine tells investigators that they quickly hit it off. Things were going good for a while, but eventually they began arguing.
Then she started getting on my case about every little thing, you know, and...
He's painting Sharonda as the aggressor in this relationship. He claimed that she was violent and she was intimidating.
Then, on February 3rd, he says the tensions reached a breaking point.
Jermaine tells investigators that he decided to leave, but he was worried about what Sharonda might do to him, and so he wasn't gonna tell her.
Look, I was gonna just slip out, okay? Because, you know, I just didn't need her going off on me again.
But Jermaine says before he could make his exit, Sharonda realized what he was up to.
As he was packing up his things, Sharonda came and questioned him. What are you doing?
I can't do this anymore, Sharonda.
What do you mean?
I can't do this no more.
What can't you do?
This!
So you're leaving?
Yes.
He said I was leaving her and she didn't want me to leave.
And she was really mad and she started physically attacking me.
He says after a while, he had no choice but to fight back.
During the struggle, Jermaine says they shattered Sharonda's bedroom windows.
Jermaine says Sharonda went ballistic, lunging at him with a knife, cutting him. The struggle ensued to get control of it.
In the struggle, the knife hit the floor. They both looked at the knife, and he dove for it.
After tracking their suspect almost 1,000 miles from Tulsa, Oklahoma to Flint, Michigan, homicide detectives have arrested Jermaine Cannon for the murder of his girlfriend, Sharonda Clark.
He showed us that he was a very dangerous man. Here's a guy that can't stay out of custody 22 days before he tries to kill somebody else.
But according to Jermaine, Sharonda was the dangerous one in their relationship.
Jermaine's side of the story was that Sharonda was the aggressor and that he was afraid of Sharonda.
Jermaine tells police that on February 3rd, he and Sharonda got into an argument when he revealed that he was leaving her.
Jermaine says she spiraled out of control.
He said we got in an argument and she pulled a knife on him.
Chill.
He was able to gain control of the knife to protect himself.
He admitted that he killed her, but he said he did it in self-defense.
Jermaine says once he realized what he'd done, he tried to help Sharonda.
Look, I didn't want her to die.
He tries to drag her body to the bathroom to find something to stop the bleeding.
He said I was gonna get her first aid.
But Jermaine could tell that Sharonda was already dead.
I couldn't call the cops because, you know, I was a wanted man.
So what did you do?
I got out of there.
He then bought a bus ticket to Flint, Michigan, and went up and knocked on his uncle's door.
Mr. Cannon did not admit that he was at fault. He blamed the victim for the whole thing, said it was all her fault.
Investigators don't buy a word of it.
It's nothing but a story, because there's nothing in evidence that supports his story.
For one thing, Jermaine doesn't have any of the defensive wounds detectives would expect to see if Sharonda had really attacked him with a knife.
He shows detectives his hand.
Didn't have a scratch on it.
What Jermaine was saying couldn't possibly be true. There was no way that she was the aggressor in this situation.
It was the bloodiest scene I'd ever prosecuted. The amount of blood indicating that she was running, trying to get away from him until she couldn't get away anymore. So there just wasn't anything to support his story.
Investigators charged him with first-degree murder.
When Jermaine's trial begins on March 12, 1996, prosecutors outline what they believe really happened that night.
They say that the argument Sharonda's neighbor witnessed was her confronting him over his lies and abuse.
Sharonda wanted him to leave.
But for Jermaine, that wasn't an option.
If she put him out, he would have nowhere to go.
He knew that things would be only worse for him if he had to go back to prison after escaping.
Instead of packing his bags, Jermaine stood his ground.
You think I'm gonna let you kick me out after everything I went through?
He enjoyed his freedom, and he wasn't gonna let anyone, not even Sharonda, stop him.
Jermaine was enraged and tried to beat Sharonda into submission.
But when that wasn't enough, Jermaine went into the kitchen and grabbed a knife.
Get away. Get away from me. Get away from me.
He then started to chase her through the house.
She's running all over this house trying to save her life. I mean, the sheer terror that she went through.
He stabbed Sharonda in cold blood.
He ended up stabbing her 4 times. It gives me chills all these years later. I'm sure it did the same thing to the jury.
Jermaine's own demeanor in the courtroom does little to help his case.
During the trial, he was sitting there with a smile on his face. And it was like, wow, are you serious?
When I saw him, I was kind of shocked. He had this cocky attitude about him, like, yeah, I'm gonna win. There was no remorse. He didn't care.
It takes the jury just 2 short hours to reach a decision.
The jury found Jermaine Cannon guilty of first-degree murder.
It was tears, like, yes, finally, we were happy and relieved.
The jury sentenced him to death by lethal injection, and ultimately, that sentence was carried out July 20th, 2023.
More than 28 years after her murder, Sharonda's loved ones are present for Jermaine's execution.
So we get in the room first, and you could see him mouthing and talking to his family like, I love you, and thumbs up, and grinning, and I'm just like, I'm instantly irritated because my mom didn't get to do any of this. She didn't get to pick her last meal. She damn sure didn't get to say goodbye to anybody. So it was like a slap in the face. It kind of felt like we were doing a make-a-wish for a death row individual.
Jermaine Cannon had an opportunity to say some last words before they started the execution.
His final words are, I confess with my mouth and believe with my heart that God raised Jesus from the dead. Therefore, I am saved.
I know it hurt my niece, my oldest niece, Yashin, more because he got to live basically a whole nother 30 years, a whole life.
Afterwards, I felt confused. I mean, I was happy that I was there. I was happy that I seen it through. I was happy that I got to support my mom when she couldn't. It was just disappointing in the mannerism of how the system was set up to carry it out.
It's a very sobering experience. You never really want to witness somebody's death. However, in my opinion, the earth is a better place without Jermaine Cannon on it.
Nearly 3 decades later, Sharonda's daughters are still struggling to cope with their mother's death.
I'm still dealing with it. I'm angry, lost, kind of. The only thing that really helps me navigate through it is my family.
I'll never forget where I came from, the things that she did for me, the sacrifices that she made. She may not be here in flesh, but she's definitely here in spirit.
In gunfire.
All you could hear was gunshots, one after another after another. It sounded like a war zone. It was just crazy, really chaotic.
A dangerous killer escapes.
You're like, okay, well, person's still out there. I was really scared.
He said your last time was hit, so he didn't give up until he got you.
But the killer's intended target remains a mystery.
People didn't know if this was related to some sort of gang warfare, if this was a hit, if this was something related to the household, and if it was, who was it related to?
Or was it a crime of passion so heated, no one could stand in its way?
He didn't really want her dead. He just wanted her to feel pain. He'd been in homicide for many years at the time. I have never heard anything like that in my life.
August 29th, 2009, 4 a.m. A patrol officer in Palm Beach County, Florida is just finishing his shift when a shocking sound pierces the hot summer night.
There were deputies in the area and they overheard the gunshots.
70 Alpha. 70 Alpha, I've got a 1081 a couple blocks away. I'm gonna check it out.
At that point, they responded to the area.
All you could hear was gunshots, one after another after another. It sounded like a war zone.
Within minutes, multiple units have arrived on the scene. A house on D Street in the community of Lake Worth. It doesn't take the responding officers long to realize they're entering a bloodbath.
70 Alpha, I have one down, starter 47.
They get to the door and they see a body of a woman.
She was laying face down in the doorway, and she had been shot in her chest and also in her thigh.
But the dead woman in the doorway is only the beginning.
I got this, go and get the back.
You got it.
They can't go in the front door because her body is laying across the doorway, and of course they don't want to disturb the crime scene. So they leave her there. They go around to the back door, try to get into the back door, but it's padlocked. So one of the first cops to arrive at the scene kicks in the door, and they go in that way. Thank God you're here. He's this way. He's been shot.
Inside, frightened witnesses lead police to another victim, cowering in a bedroom closet.
Oh my God.
He had been shot in the chest. He was still alive. He kept telling them he couldn't breathe.
The man struggles to tell police his name is Ronald Anthony Wright, a.k.a. Am, but that's about all Mr. Wright is able to say.
He's still conscious. He's still alive. And they ask him, who shot you?
Who did this? I got help coming for you.
As Ronald Amp Wright is transported to Delray Community Hospital, police come across their first potential clue.
I've got a gun here.
A .380 caliber pistol in the same room.
It's still hot.
Think that belongs to Mr. Wright?
Could be.
While the team inside continues to search the house, officers outside begin questioning the many eyewitnesses. In doing so, they quickly identify the deceased female on the front porch, 25-year-old Debbie Sears. Officers then try to piece together what took place at the house on D Street.
And speaking to all the people, when the gunshots ran out, there was a first set of gunshots, and then seconds later, there was another set of gunshots. When one of the neighbors ran to the window to see what was going on, they saw an individual running into the house.
You're getting varying stories from several eyewitnesses. One neighbor states they saw the suspect flee on foot.
Operating on this information, police dispatch canine units throughout the neighborhood. But instead of finding a possible suspect, police discover even more collateral damage.
There's a red vehicle parked in front, and it's got a broken windshield where a projectile had went through. And then you saw some other damage on the other side of the car that was consistent with more projectile damage.
Not far from the shot-up car, they find yet another victim.
She was a young female also. She had run from the scene, and the suspect literally chased her down in her flip-flops. She was running out of her shoes.
She was in one of the neighbors' driveways. She had been shot 7 times, and she was also expired.
Witnesses tell police the woman in the driveway is 29-year-old Yamika Murphy, the best friend of Debbie Sears, the victim from the front porch. The question now is which of these individuals was the killer's intended target? Ronald Amp White, Debbie Sears, or the latest victim, Yamika Murphy. Born in West Palm Beach, Florida in 1980, Yamika Murphy was raised by a single mom who worked several jobs in order to make ends meet. At an early age, it was clear Yamika had inherited her mother's independent spirit.
She was an adorable baby. She was smart, and you could tell she was going to have that personality of a strong-willed person, independent, tight.
As a teenager, Yamika discovered a love of cooking, which earned her the nickname Yummy from friends and family.
I was at work, and I came home one day. So Yummy decided to cook me dinner and have it ready for me when I got home. She was a very good chef. She loved to cook. Everyone wants her food.
Yamika dreamed of becoming a chef, and in 2008, she was accepted to a prestigious culinary institute in nearby Palm Beach.
She graduated from culinary arts school, and I was very proud of her during graduation. It was a happy time for the family.
But cooking wasn't Yamika's only passion.
She was a chef, and at the same time, she was an aspiring rap star.
Yamika rapped under the rap name of Yummy. She still wanted to pursue a career as a rap artist, even if it was recreationally at the time.
Yamika's love of both cooking and music ensured she always had plenty of friends around.
She always had a lot of people at her house. Always took care of people. If they had nowhere to stay, they would stay there.
Among those Yamika took under her wing was a young girl named Debbie Sears.
Debbie grew up without, her mom. And grandma passed away and she met Yummy. Yummy then brought her in. She got a job, was doing good. And that's how they became really close, friends.
Debbie was really goofy. She, along with everybody else, cracked jokes, and all of us hung out real tight.
The outgoing Yamika also had lots of boyfriends, but it wasn't until the summer of 2008 that she became serious with one of them, a friend from the neighborhood, 24-year-old Bruce Strawn.
Hey, babe, what's going on? Nothing. Yamika loved that he also came from a similar background as her. Yamika and Bruce ran in the same circles. They're both from poor families.
But where Yamika was raised by a kind and loving mother, Bruce wasn't so fortunate.
Bruce had a difficult childhood, to say the least. His mom, everyone who was an adult in his family, seemed to have been strung out on drugs.
Being a caring person and always liking to help people is probably what attracted Yamika to Bruce. She wanted to bring out the best of him.
Bruce was just as enamored by Yamika.
She was intelligent. She came from the same hood he came from. And she represented not only the love he's always been waiting for, but a person that was just like him, but excelled anyway. She had a job, she had great stability, and so he looked up to that. He felt like this is somebody I can start my life with and be more settled. They fell head over heels in love.
Bruce and Yamika were very passionate about each other. Even though Bruce was 4 years younger than Yamika, he was the one who wanted to have the family.
In January of 2009, Bruce and Yamika tied the knot.
They just made their minds up right quick and they went to the courthouse. She sounded like she was excited about the fact that, her and Bruce had got married.
A few months later, the couple moved into a house in nearby Lake Worth. You have two relatively young people who are totally in love and treat each other good. But no sooner had they moved in with each other than the passion between Yamika and Bruce began to burn a little too hot.
He needs to be home.
You know what?
Bruce and Yamika start to clash and start to fight a lot.
Even though she was a chef, she didn't want to be home cooking and cleaning all the time. Bruce, on the other hand, wanted the ideal woman who was always at home taking care of the family. Bruce often shared his frustrations with his best friend, electrician Ronald Amp Wright. Ronald was always there throughout everything for Bruce. Bruce would tell Ronald any argument that him and Yamika had, and Ronald would tell him to chill out, take things day by day, and just don't be so uptight about everything. But Ronald's advice didn't seem to help, and in June of 2009, Bruce and Yamika decided to call it quits.
Yummy was pretty young when she married. It didn't work out. I feel because of maybe domestic issues, and so the marriage didn't last very long.
Before long, Yamika began dating a 23-year-old music producer named Jacoby Hatton.
Yami was into her music. He would help her because he was a producer. So they would get together and make songs and stuff together.
If Yamika was aware that Jacoby was also a convicted criminal with a series of weapons charges, it didn't seem to matter. Jacoby to Yamika is a breath of fresh air. He accepts her for who she is and what she wants to do in life. This is gonna be so dumb.
She decided she was going to move on with her life. She found herself a new boyfriend in Mr. Hatton, and by all accounts, it looked as if they were happy.
But as police in Lake Worth survey the carnage, the prospect of new love for Yamika has been shattered in a hailstorm of bullets. You have a mass shooting in Lake Worth, and nobody knows if this person is coming back. People are terrified at this point. This guy came into a yard, opened fire on a house, and the police cannot find him. It's the wee morning hours of August 29th, 2009, and police in Lake Worth, Florida are investigating the shooting deaths of Yamika Murphy and her best friend, Debbie Sears. Their friend, Ronald Amp Wright, has also been transported to the hospital with life-threatening injuries.
It was just crazy, really chaotic. Like, it's a big crime scene. Literally, like, almost 2 blocks, shut up.
As the sun rises over the crime scene, homicide detectives arrive and start collecting additional statements. Police start to interview people at Yamika's house, and they keep hearing that there were multiple gunshots, but they ran and hid in different places in the house, so no one really had eyes on the shooter. A few of Yamika's friends gather at the scene, tell police they'd all headed to Yamika's house after a night on the town.
We were out and we were just hanging out, having a good time. Yamika Murphy and her friends go out drinking and partying, and then everyone decides to go back to Yamika's house.
And was there anybody else in the house besides you?
According to Yamika's friends, her new love interest, Jacoby Hatton, had also been there. But Jacoby disappeared just before the gunfire erupted.
The witnesses, they were hanging out with everybody else, watching a movie, and fell asleep, and then was awakened by the gunfire.
No one knows how Debbie, Ronald, and Yamika ended up in 3 different spots, all with deadly gunshot wounds. Nor do they have any idea where Jacoby Hatton is now.
Thank you so much, and we may need to speak to you again.
They put out, be on the lookout. No one knew where he was, so the manhunt was on.
As officers span out across Palm Beach County in search of Jacoby, K-9 units continue to scour the immediate vicinity, while CSI officers collect dozens of shell casings from around the scene.
The shell casings recovered on the scene in front of the house by the red car and where Yamika's body was found were all AK-47 rounds.
This isn't your typical everyday gun that people carry around. This is the type of gun that you associate with wars or with gang banging or with some sort of mafia-style hitman.
And based on the trail of blood leading to Yamika's body, police think they have an idea what happened.
Yamika ran down the street, literally out of her shoes, down the street, around the corner. And at that point, that's when he raises the AK-47 and just guns her down in the middle of the driveway. She had been shot multiple times, including in her chest. There were bullet fragments in different parts of her chest. She had bullet holes in her thighs.
As police continue to gather evidence at the scene, the K-9 unit locates a man hiding nearby.
Sheriff's Department, let me see your hands! Let me see your hands!
Oh, okay, come here. They find an individual hiding under an SUV, block away.
They don't know who he is at the time. All they know is that he's a male that's hiding, and they order him out.
James, mind your back.
Could this be the individual responsible for the carnage at Yamika's house? And if so, is the man in custody potential suspect Jacoby Hatton? From the back seat of the police cruiser, the man identifies himself as one LaDerrick Brown.
He informed them that he didn't do anything wrong, but he did have arrest warrants, and that's why he was hiding.
They do a background on him once they identify him, and we do a records check, and it turns out he had 2 warrants for carrying concealed firearms.
Perhaps rap producer Jacoby Hatton isn't the man police are looking for after all. But for now, the question is whether LaDerrick Brown is the shooter, an innocent bystander, or an eyewitness who managed to escape the deadly shootout.
As day went on, that's when it started getting crazy.
Sheriff's office, get on the ground! Don't move, don't move, don't move!
It's been 4 hours since a ghastly massacre in Lake Worth, Florida, claimed the lives of Yamika Murphy and her best friend Debbie Sears, and left their friend Ronald Amp Wright clinging to life at Delray Memorial Hospital.
Trauma Hawk landed and took him. And when they got him to the hospital, he had no pulse, no heartbeat.
While doctors were struggling to revive Ronald at the hospital, police dogs located a man hiding under an SUV less than a block away from the shooting.
They take him out at gunpoint, drag him out, cuff him, and then try to identify who he is and what he's doing there. At this point, nobody knows who he is.
The man tells police his name is LaDerrick Brown and claims he witnessed the shooting.
I did see the shooting when I was in the house. Okay, what was the purpose of you being here tonight? Were you visiting or just having a good time? What time did you arrive? I said around 12:30.
They basically said he was hanging out in the house. They watched a movie in the living room, and as everybody started to fall out and go to sleep, he just stayed out hanging out.
So everybody was just relaxing, chilling, hanging out in the bedrooms? Yes, sir. Where was your Yamika? She had walked out the front door. Before I dozed off and went to sleep, I did see her walk out the front door.
He said he fell asleep, and then he was awakened by the gunfire.
I was asleep in the front room. I heard a pop, 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 pop.
LaDerrick tells police that right after that, he saw Ronald Wright run into the house.
He came in the house, bloody t-shirt, walked all the way to the back of the house. And then what happened? I climbed through the window. I ran. You weren't worried about getting shot? I was, but I knew I had a warrant. And I knew the police was coming, so I left.
Based on their interview with LaDerrick Brown, police now believe Ronald Amp Wright ran inside after being shot, perhaps to hide, or perhaps to grab his gun and return fire. This theory depicts LaDerrick as a witness, not as a perpetrator. Police let Mr. Brown go and turned their attention back to Yamika's missing boyfriend, aspiring hip-hop producer Jacoby Hatton.
Police want to know why Jacoby would be hiding if he didn't do anything.
Along with the complexities of performing a criminal investigation, the police also had to deal with the multitude of onlookers and bystanders that came to the scene.
This is my daughter's car. This is my daughter.
Among those arriving on the scene are family members of victim Yamika Murphy, desperate for answers.
I remember the yellow tape, and then I remember I just went and sat down alongside of the police car. It was like an out-of-body experience. I was devastated. I was furious. That some individual, had enough hate in his heart to shoot my child 7 times.
Police are frantically searching for the man they are beginning to suspect may be that individual, Yamika's new boyfriend, Jacoby Hatton. But it turns out they don't have to search for long.
Sir, stand back. This is a crime scene.
I'm Jacoby Hatton.
I talked to Jacoby, and he was very polite. And at the same time, you could tell he was obviously under a lot of stress because of everything that had happened.
You were here at the house today with Yamika?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And how long did you know her?
I know her for like a year. She came to me because I got a studio, you know what I'm saying? I record stuff.
And what happened? Where were you when this whole thing started?
Well, she had just came in, right? And she woke me up.
Okay, what time was that?
I don't really know.
He was in the room, inside one of the bedrooms of the house, and knew that his girlfriend was out of the house.
I'm like, what the hell she going out there this time of night for, you know what I'm saying?
Jacoby says at that point he went back to sleep, and the next time he awoke, it was to the sound of gunfire.
I was boom, so my adrenaline kicked in, so I'm like,
Jacoby's statement paints him as another witness, not the shooter. It also corroborates LaDerrick Brown's version of events, that Yamika walked outside at some point just prior to the shooting. What Jacoby says next also explains why he'd initially been so reluctant to talk to police.
I grabbed the gun, she had a license firearm, she left it over here, so I grabbed the gun and I ran outside.
Even though he was a convicted felon and wasn't supposed to be in possession of any firearms, when he heard this happen, he ran out of the house, he grabbed the weapon, even though he wasn't supposed to, and was trying to stop him from killing Yamika.
So like, while I'm running around the corner, I hear young scream, but I ain't like make it all the way around the corner, I heard it. So there I'm running like towards him, he turned around and started shooting at him, then I started back shooting at him. He took off.
At that point, Jacoby claims he ran inside and crossed paths with the wounded Ronald Amp Wright.
Now, took the gun from me.
Why did he take the gun from you?
I don't know, just snatched it out of my hand. He was like, bro, you don't need this.
This explains why the handgun was found in the closet near Ronald Wright. As to the identity of the shooter, Jacoby claims he didn't get a good look at him.
It was very dark. What he saw was muzzle flashes. He assumed he was being shot at, and he fled back to the house.
Thank you.
As detectives are pondering whether or not Jacoby Hatton is telling the truth, a stunning series of events will unfold and lay bare the shocking truth behind this unimaginable crime. August 29th, 2009. Police in Palm Beach County, Florida are mere hours into an investigation of a horrific murder that claimed the lives of 29-year-old chef and aspiring rapper Yamika Murphy and her best friend, Debbie Sears.
These are young people whose lives were snuffed out. Anything that they dreamed or aspired to be ended right there that night.
Police believe a third victim, Ronald Amp Wright, may hold the key to identifying the shooter, if he survives.
He kept saying he couldn't breathe. They transport him to the hospital.
He was a young individual, very strong, but at some point in time, the doctor looks and it's just not going to happen. We were told on scene that
There were no eyewitnesses. No one knew who did it. The entire county was on edge because here's a man who supposedly gunned down 3 lives in cold blood, and he was still on the loose.
With no other leads, police reach out to Yamika's estranged husband, Bruce, to see if he can offer any assistance.
They were going through an ugly breakup.
But when they arrive at his home in Boynton Beach, he's not there.
Hello. We need to ask you some questions.
Bruce's mother is, though.
Do you know the whereabouts of your son, Bruce, the night of the shooting?
She offers them a fairly airtight alibi for her son's whereabouts.
Yeah, he was here with me.
Bruce Strawn's mother stated that at the time this offense was committed, that Bruce Strawn was with her.
As to Bruce's whereabouts now, his mother says she doesn't know.
Thank you for talking with us, and we'll be in touch.
Tactical agents were put in place, and they had surveillance on Bruce trying to find him.
But despite the surveillance efforts, there's no sign of Bruce anywhere in Palm Beach County. Then, on the afternoon of August 30th, police receive an unexpected tip from a man named Frederick Castle.
Frederick called the sheriff's office and stated that he had information regarding the homicide. He agreed to come back to the sheriff's office. During that interview, he stated that he was with Yamika purchasing some marijuana.
She did a few things she shouldn't have done to make ends meet.
We're homicide detectives. We don't care about any of this stuff.
All right, so Yamika called you.
Yamika called me, said she just scored.
Frederick said that she had called him and said she had some marijuana or something that he was looking for to buy some around 3:30. Who was with her?
There was one guy with dreads. He was sitting in a seat up front.
Okay.
The girl in the back, I know her, but I don't know her. She was behind Yummy.
Detectives can only assume that Yamika's companions were Ronald Wright and Debbie Sears. Frederick claims that when he arrived at the location where the deal was to go down, Yamika seemed spooked.
She heard something. She says, let's go.
Yamika heard something in the bushes and felt uncomfortable and told Frederick that she was a little scared. She said, I don't want to be here. Let's go around the corner. Let's go somewhere else. And they drove off and then came back. When did she go back to the house?
At 24.
Okay. Were you with her?
No. Once I get my stuff, I'm out of there.
Could Yamika have sensed an ambush coming just moments before the attack? What Frederick tells police next seems to support that theory.
That phone call I got tonight, okay, I almost had changed my trust. I didn't like what I heard.
The phone call from
who? Somebody in Boynton Beach.
According to Frederick, the caller implied that he was a friend of the killer, then proceeded to warn Frederick about the violence headed his way.
He said, your last on this hit. He said, he ain't giving up until he gets you. What are you talking about? He says, you'll find out soon enough. He says, stay very, very dark. Quote unquote.
Though detectives' efforts to identify the caller prove unsuccessful, they can't help but wonder, is this triple homicide drug-related? And if so, were Yamika and her friends in over their heads with some truly violent criminals?
There's a possibility that this could just be a drug war from drug deals that went bad or people trying to claim new territory. We really just don't know. You sitting back and you're like, okay, look, person's still out there. You don't know the motive.
What's his next move? Because if you murdered 3 people, like where's your mind? So I was on the edge.
It's been 2 days since Yamika Murphy, Debbie Sears, and Ronald Amp Wright were gunned down in Lake Worth, Florida. So far, the investigation has revealed rumors of drug deals, jilted lovers, and a budding romance between Yamika
to some sort of gang warfare, if this was a hit, if this was something related to the household, and if it was, who was it related to?
Hoping for answers, police again turn to Yamika's family.
Can you think of anybody else who would want to harm Yamika or Debbie?
Yamika's mother tells police that she believes Yamika's estranged husband, Bruce Strawn, is the killer.
And speaking to the family history of the relationship between Bruce and Yamika, the family was saying it was a violent relationship. He was constantly threatening her.
You're not listening to me though. There was another incident where she called me on the phone and she said, Mom, Bruce is around here threatening me again. And so I said, well, Yummy, do you want me to call the police? She was like, no, I don't want you to call the police, because I don't feel it's that bad where police have to be here.
When things were good, things were really good between Bruce and Yamika. But when things were bad, the violence escalated.
And according to Yamika's family, when tempers
kill you, I'm gonna kill your mother, I'm gonna find out where you are. You're already on the rest in peace list.
Yamika's mother also states that when her daughter began seeing Jacoby Hadden, Bruce's jealousy intensified.
He really hated that. She had moved on. They weren't even divorced.
Yamika's family tells police in July of 2009, Bruce's temper reached an all-time high when he came to Yamika's house and threatened everyone there with a gun.
Debbie Sears was inside along with 2 other people. She was tells him he's gonna kill everyone in the home.
Get out of my house!
According to Yamika's family, that incident was the breaking point for Yamika. She realized the situation had gotten out of control and filed an incident report with local police.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Police look into the status of the report and determine that assault charges are now pending against Bruce. With this new information, Bruce is beginning to look like the shooter after all. There's just one problem with that theory.
Bruce had no issues with Amp or with Debbie. The only issue was with Yamika.
Bruce Strawn and Ronald Wright were good friends. Debbie Sears was the mother of Bruce's brother's child. So essentially, she was like family. And the question is, why would Bruce kill someone who was like family?
There's only one person who can answer that question. Police issue a bolo on Bruce Strawn.
There was a lot of people looking for Bruce. I mean, you have to think it's 3 families.
After days of looking and hunting, numerous tips came into police.
But none of them pans out. Then, a few days later, police finally get a solid lead.
They get an anonymous tip saying that someone who appears to be Bruce is sitting on a porch in Delray Beach. They decide to check it out.
With a tactical team in place, police descend on the address and finally spot Bruce Strawn.
Don't get on the ground! Don't move!
Bruce Strawn sees the police. He starts to make a mad dash, jumps over a fence, he hides in a bush.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground!
There's a struggle that ensues, and he's ultimately arrested. During the struggle of trying to apprehend Bruce, he sustained multiple lacerations on his face.
Officers escort the injured Strawn to the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office and sit him down in an interview room.
We bring him in for an interview, but he's not wanting to talk to any of the detectives. He's speaking to us, but he's not telling us what happened.
Bruce, I know you were there.
Saturday in the morning. You know I was there Saturday in the morning?
Yeah, you were at the house. When I interviewed him, he basically let me know that he knew what the game was, and he had an answer for everything. You're not gonna tell us why you did it?
I'm gonna tell you why I did what.
Why you killed her?
Why I killed who?
Yamika.
You want me to tell you why I did nothing?
At that point, detectives inform Bruce that his friend, Ronald Amp Wright, has succumbed to his multiple gunshot wounds.
Amp's dead. Did you know he was hanging at the house?
On Gold House. Was he a friend of yours? You know, you home with him.
Though investigators are itching to question Bruce further, they must hit pause and allow him to be treated for the injuries he suffered during his failed attempt to flee from police.
At this time, police officers have to take him for medical attention at a nearby hospital.
In the police cruiser, it really gets weird.
This case changed our response in how we filed warrants for domestic violence cases. Instead of the warrant being processed 3 to 4 weeks later, we made changes that these warrants now are getting walked through immediately. The warrants go into the system immediately, and this case was what prompted us to change that. We had to do something different than what we were doing, because what we were doing, even though we were following protocol at the time, it wasn't working.
2 days after a mass shooting that claimed 3 lives, including that of 29-year-old aspiring chef Yamika Murphy, police in Palm Beach County, Florida have arrested her estranged husband, Bruce Strawn, on suspicion of murder.
I can just remember just looking up at the TV. I think that's where reality hit me. I'm just looking at him like, wow, like you're the person that did this.
Despite the arrest, Bruce has denied any involvement in the murders. After getting nowhere with him in an interrogation room, police transport him to a local hospital.
En route to the hospital, take care of the injuries he suffered while he was being arrested. It really gets weird.
He starts to speak to the agent that is transporting him, and they develop a rapport, and he starts to tell him what happened.
According to Bruce, it all started around 1 a.m. on August 29th, just 3 hours prior to the shootings.
Bruce is in the neighborhood. He passes her home, and he can see Yamika. She's entertaining people.
Bruce kind of still considered the house to be his house because that was the place that he thought he and Yamika were going to make a life together for themselves. And here she is having these different friends over, and he could not take that.
Grass done got so high in there too, right? I was squatting down for a minute, that's looking, because I couldn't see no faces.
He goes to the rear of the building and peers through the window. He looks inside and sees Yamika kissing on her new boyfriend.
So I can see right in, on the side of the house I was on now, see hugging, kissing.
Bruce tells the transport officer that seeing his estranged wife with another man sent him over the edge.
It just became too unbearable for him. So he finds the AK-47, which he has stashed in the yard because he used to live in that house with Yamika. He finds the gun, and he just starts watching them through the bushes. Bruce was there watching for about 2 to 2.5 hours. Literally just watching.
Yamika goes and sits in a car. Her friend Debbie is sitting on the front steps. Once he has his weapons ready, he does a sneak attack. He gets to Debbie first, shoots her in the chest and in the leg and several other places.
He sees the people in the car, and he shoots the driver, and he doesn't realize it's his friend.
Debbie got hit first, and I got hit second. I kept going because I was trying to go for her.
Yamika was running up the street. I believe she was trying to hide at that point. And Bruce had come up and he started shooting as she was running.
Bruce chased down his estranged wife until she fell.
She was already shot a couple times. It was in the bottom half of her body, her ankle. One bullet went through her leg and literally broke the bone into two. So at that time, she just said, just can't run anymore. Do what you gotta do then. See you on the other side.
I can't imagine laying on the ground and realizing that this person who I one time loved and thought loved me is standing over me, and it's just heartless.
Where did you run to? I was on the train. So you walked all the way back to what? You walked all the way to Boynton?
When I listened to the recording of the confession, I was stunned. I had been in homicide for many years at the time. I have never heard anything like that in my life.
2 days later, another anonymous tip leads police to the last piece of the puzzle, the murder weapon.
It was in the shed of one of his family members' houses.
Ballistic tests prove it's a perfect match to the shell casings found in the scene. On October 31st, 2013, the state of Florida versus Bruce Strachan gets underway. In opening arguments, prosecutors paint Bruce as a cold, calculating murderer, a jilted lover who'd been plotting revenge for months.
They talked about how he held her up at gunpoint, and so that by the time he actually pulled out the gun and ended her life, that it wasn't a crime of passion, it was just him doing exactly what he said he was going to do, and that was to kill her and everyone who was with her at the time that he decided to kill her.
The defense doesn't deny that Bruce killed Yamika and her 2 friends, but they insist there is no proof the shooting was premeditated.
They were trying to convince the jury to convict Bruce of involuntary manslaughter, which is a heat of the passion murder instead of first-degree premeditated murder.
The defense was trying to paint Yamika as this Barbie girl that was playing with Bruce's emotions.
The jury doesn't buy it.
They had numerous statements from various witnesses saying that he said he was going to kill her. There was just too much evidence to go with this crime of passion story.
They found him guilty of first-degree murder for all 3 counts. He killed all 3 people.
Just to hear that word, guilty. And yes, that was the word I wanted to hear. After that part of it, I didn't care whether they gave him life or gave him death. I just wanted to hear that he was guilty.
After 4 days of testimony, it only took them a half hour of deliberation to come back and say that they thought Bruce should be sentenced to life in prison.
To me, 3 consecutive life sentences is the death penalty. He'll never see the light of day again. You know, he'll be in there until he's dead.
And although the scars Bruce left on countless people may be healing, they will never fully go away.
His mama can go see him. Physically talk. I can't. I take my son flowers. Gotta go down to make sure the grave clean. His birthdays, we have to celebrate in the heart, not with him. He left a scar in my heart. Never go away.
I think that it was sad that Bruce took the coward way to try to get rid of her because he couldn't be with her. It was really messed up that he couldn't just move on like she did. He didn't want to see her happy. So he took her and everyone else.
When an old flame is reignited, the passion is like gasoline on an open fire.
This was the reunion they had waited so long for. He felt as if Carissa Ellison made him a better person.
Love gives hope.
But what neither yet knew is that around them, tempers were flaring.
Carissa had a few male friends. He was making it a living situation for my dad over there, period.
It's very creepy to think that someone is stalking you from across the street in a cemetery of all places.
All of which would lead to an explosion of violence, the likes of which no one in Shreveport, Louisiana will ever forget.
It literally sent a chill up my spine.
It's like a house of wolves.
Who can do this to someone and still profess to love them?
You just keep asking the question and you can't come up with an answer.
July 18th, 2013. It's a sweltering summer night in Shreveport, Louisiana. But as the heat and humidity washes over the city, a terrifying storm is about to hit like a hurricane. It begins just before 10 p.m. when 911 dispatchers receive an alarming call.
911, emergency? Man, my mom is dead. Just got home from work. I'm not getting a heartbeat. Oh, my Lord, Mama!
The caller identifies himself as 54-year-old Kelvin Ellison, and the victim, his mother, 78-year-old Irene Ellison.
You can hear him wailing on the recording, like crying and wailing as he tells the 911 operator what he sees.
Is she bleeding? No, she's bleeding from my chest, and I see a hole in her chest.
Recognizing the gravity of the situation, dispatchers transfer Kelvin's call to the Shreveport Police Department.
It was late. My mother looked like she's been shot. My sister's supposed to be here home sitting with her, and I don't know where the hell she's at.
He's screaming, and he gets angry because his sister, Carissa Ellison, was the person that was supposed to be home watching his mother.
As first responders race to the scene, Kelvin continues his unsettling phone call with police.
Let me touch my foot right on where y'all see my address. Hey, oh. I'm right there in there with you. There's somebody else up in my mama's house.
The 911 responded did not know what was going on, and they kept asking, and he couldn't even talk.
Oh, man, no, this crazy man.
But what other evil discovery lurked inside the threshold of that home? And where was Irene's daughter, Carissa? It's just the first of many questions that will hold this city in its grasp. For when love turns to jealousy, the repercussions can be explosive.
Nobody was prepared for that story. Like, nobody was expecting anything like that.
For Carissa Marshall Ellison, life began in Shreveport, Louisiana on July 1st, 1972.
Carissa lived in Moortown, which is primarily an African American community.
I watched Carissa grow from a little girl on up till adulthood. Carissa's hopes and dreams were to have a family and have a quiet life.
That dream seemed to take hold for Carissa when she met the love of her life, Samuel Green.
Carissa and Samuel fell in love and eventually had 2 beautiful children together.
But after several years together, life's hardships drove a wedge in Carissa and Samuel's relationship. Despite still loving each other, Carissa and Samuel felt it best to go their separate ways.
Carissa communicated to everyone the feelings that she had for the father of her children, and those remained even after years of not being together.
She maintained a good relationship with her children's father, and they shared custody.
Following her breakup with Samuel, Carissa and her 2 children spent most of their time with Carissa's mother, Irene, and her brother, Kelvin. For Carissa, the additional family time together proved to be the perfect antidote for mending a broken heart.
Carissa was a homebody. She didn't really do too much. She was very family-centered, really loved her mom and her kids.
Carissa loved being a mom and always made sure her children had everything that they needed.
Her kids went to live with the father during the summertime, and during the school years, lived with Carissa.
Carissa Ellison also worked at Walmart here in Shreveport. People liked Carissa. She was fun-loving. All right, well, let you go down. Okay, good to see you. Nice seeing you. Bye.
Carissa was essentially a carbon copy of her mother, Irene.
Irene was just a really sweet lady that would always be in her garden. Her and her daughter were really close. They were always around each other. What you need me to do over here? Get to work. All right, boss. Miss Irene is grandma to everybody, so it was not out of the norm for people to be at Miss Irene's home visiting her or Carissa.
As for Carissa's personal life, the beautiful single mother attracted plenty of attention over the years. Still, it wasn't until one day in 2011 that 39-year-old Carissa truly met someone that captured her heart.
Hi, I'm Brian.
Hi.
So you're Irene Ellison's daughter?
Yeah, how did you guess?
Just as beautiful as your father.
Oh, you're a charmer.
Brian Wilson was a 58-year-old handsome man, charming man, funny man.
He drove cabs. He had other business hustles that he had going on. He sold alarms.
Like Carissa, Brian was born and raised in Shreveport, and he was also a single parent.
My kids see him and everything.
Oh, you have kids?
They're grown and gone mostly, but they come around on weekends and I get to see them.
Okay, I have kids as well. 2, a boy and a girl, and they are my world.
As Carissa and Brian got to know one another that day, both liked what they saw.
My dad was considered a ladies' man. He did see a lot of women. He had a gold tongue. He can talk and he can draw you in just by his conversation.
But it didn't take long for this ladies' man to become a one-woman man.
This is Carissa.
Hey, how are you? I just remember one day my dad came over with Carissa and he introduced us to her, and they were inseparable ever since then.
Wow, it's nice to finally meet you guys.
I think that my dad and Carissa were really into each other because he wasn't the type to just bring females around us, if they weren't special to him.
But as much as Brian adored Carissa, there were things from his past that he just couldn't shake. Growing up in a tough, poverty-stricken area of Shreveport, Brian's actions sometimes ran afoul of the law when it came to providing for his family.
My dad was no angel. He did time for various things, mostly white-collar stuff.
I know they were dating for at least maybe a year or 2, and then he had to go to jail.
While Brian was in prison, Carissa did her best to push onward.
She was out on her own, waiting for my dad to get out of jail. She still had things that she had to do. She didn't have a car, but she had to depend on other people's transportation and things like that, too.
One of Carissa's closest male companions during this time was Daniel Powell.
They exchanged numbers and would talk on the phone every now and then.
While Daniel was able to provide Carissa with emotional support, Carissa and her mother still needed help with the everyday chores.
Mind if I mow the yard on Saturday?
That'll be perfect.
That'll be
One of the male friends that Carissa Ellison had was Tommy Lee Wilson. He was a taxi cab driver, and he would take her to work to Walmart, and it developed into a friendship where he would come to Carissa Ellison's home all the time.
Hey, Miss Carissa. How you doing?
I told you, just call me Carissa.
Whatever, Miss Carissa.
He eventually started doing work around the Ellison's home. He would also help Miss Irene Ellison around the house, and he helped build a shed in the back of the home.
Tommy put a lot of work into this project. He would work on it after his shift and on weekends, and he even ran electricity to it. It was comfortable enough for someone to live in, and that someone was Tommy.
As the months passed, Carissa and her family grew closer to Tommy. Then, in January 2013, Carissa got the news she'd long waited to hear.
Brian was being released, and Carissa was thrilled.
When he got out of prison, they reconnected. When he picked him up, that's the first place where I took him back to Carissa's house.
Brian served his time in jail and had turned over a new leaf in life. And he and Carissa was going to make that change together.
Brian Wilson wanted to do better because he felt as if Carissa Ellison made him a better person.
Love gives people hope.
With the blessing of Carissa's mother, Irene, Brian moved into the shed behind the Ellison home, and Tommy moved out. For Brian and Carissa, it was a reunion like no other.
They were living together. You could pretty much say they were already like common law married. It seemed like they were headed towards like being together until death do you part.
But nobody could anticipate just how prophetic those words would turn out to be, or the full horror that was about to wash over the city.
Alec and Madison are finally getting married, and nothing will stand in their way, except maybe his new boss or her demanding job.
You want to blow up our engagement over one weekend?
After being separated for nearly a year, Brian Wilson and Carissa Ellison were excited to put the past behind them and start a new chapter together.
I think it's very plausible when you find somebody that's family for you.
But on July 18th, 2013, hope gave way to heartache in the form of a terrible discovery.
Carissa Ellison's brother, Kelvin, called 911 that night and claimed that someone had shot their mother, Irene.
As police race to the scene, this unfolding tragedy takes an even more ominous turn.
It's somebody else up in my mother's house. Oh, man. Who is it? Oh, this guy my sister was dating. I told her I didn't want this shit out of my house. Let me see about my sister. She's in it out there and all that on my front.
Okay, calm down. The police are on the way.
Yeah, I'm out of there.
Minutes later, first responders arrive at the scene. Inside the home, they find the bodies of 78-year-old Irene Ellison, 41-year-old Carissa Ellison, and Carissa's 58-year-old boyfriend, Brian Wilson.
Die in such a tragic and horrifying way. Being a victim of violence, I can't imagine anything more shocking to anybody.
As detectives from the Shreveport Police Department arrive on the scene, they start by examining their three victims.
Brian Wilson is laid back on the couch. You can see a hole in his chest and blood.
Both Brian Wilson and Irene Ellison appear to have single gunshot wounds to the heart.
In Irene Ellison's room, they find that her hands and wrists are bound behind her back with an electrical cord.
You're talking about a 78-year-old woman.
But nothing can prepare investigators for the scene awaiting them in Carissa's room.
Could be a home invasion gone wrong. The crime scene was unreal. There was so much blood on Carissa's scene, more so than anyone else's.
What they found was her in her bed, partially wrapped in a blanket of some sort, with a lot of blood everywhere.
As investigators continue to survey the horrific setting of the triple homicide, they can't help but ask themselves, who would commit such a wicked deed, and why?
Naturally, one question the police had is, are they dealing with a double murder-suicide?
But as police search the home, they find no sign of a handgun near any of their victims. What they do note, however, is a distinct aroma in the air.
You smell that?
Yeah, I smell it. One of the first things that they made mention of was a heavy, strong smell of Clorox.
We got something here.
I don't think it was uncommon to have bleach in the house because Irene was a very clean person. What was uncommon is the fact that the bleach was strewn about the house and that it was staining the carpet in different areas.
You can assume that someone's trying to clean something up, and outside of cleaning something up, they're also degrading that DNA that they're wiping up with that.
But who had the time and opportunity to clean up the scene? To answer that question, detectives turn to the families. They begin with Carissa's brother, Kelvin Ellison.
I'm sorry for your loss. I know it's hard, but we gotta talk about what happened here tonight. I'm gonna need you to come to the station and make a formal statement.
I understand, Detective. Whatever you need me to do, I'll be glad to help.
As officers transfer Kelvin to the station, detectives begin notifying the rest of the families. The news is more than anyone can bear.
My brother said, Daddy died. I was like, okay, I'm thinking natural causes. But then he said, Daddy got murdered. I just immediately broke down. I couldn't contain myself.
It kind of tore my heart out my chest. It took a lot of life out of me when I found out about what happened.
While detectives are on the phone with Brian's family, Brian's children reveal their own suspicions about who may have killed their father.
My dad got along real good with all the family, but just Carissa's brother, they always had their confrontation.
Every time that he would come in the house, the brothers would get into it with Carissa and his mom.
What's up, man? What's happening? Nothing, work. Who's all these guys in here, man? We're just some friends, you know. I think you and your friends need to find another place to play, man.
Kelvin. Carissa's brother did not like a lot of traffic in his mother's home, and it had some problems with some men that had come around. He was making a living situation for my dad over there, Pure Hell. Carissa's brother felt like if his sister was going to entertain these men or be friends with them, they should do it somewhere else.
Why does every time he get here, he act like this is his place? I don't like it, Carissa.
We thought maybe, okay, he just got fed up with my dad being there and Miss Irene, and Carissa sided with my dad, and that upset him, and it just made him go off or whatever. Well, that's what we were thinking at the time.
Detectives begin to wonder, could Carissa's grieving brother really be involved in the triple homicide after all?
The brother obviously had access to that home, so naturally they would look to him.
As police prepare to sit down with Kelvin about the events of the night, no one knows if he will take them one step closer to the truth or deeper into the shadows.
It just was like a scene out of a movie or something.
In the midnight hours of July 18th, 2013, detectives in Shreveport, Louisiana are trying to piece together the events surrounding the tragic deaths of 78-year-old Irene Ellison, her daughter, 41-year-old Carissa Ellison, and Carissa's boyfriend, 58-year-old Brian Wilson. In the aftermath of the slayings, investigators learned that Carissa's brother, Kelvin, had been fighting with his family over the fact that Brian Wilson was living with them.
Carissa's brother was a possible suspect. Sometimes you have family members who can't get along.
He was the one who placed the 911 call. So it was like they gave him time to commit the murder, come up with an alibi, act like he was all worried and everything.
While police continue scouring the crime scene, investigators sit down with Kelvin.
Look, we need you to walk us through your day. Can you do that?
Yeah, sure.
Carissa's brother tells the detectives, I woke up that day like a normal day. I went to work. I worked 2 jobs, and it's very normal for me to go to my first job, come home, check on mama, make sure everything's okay.
Kelvin tells investigators that he left his mother's house around 6 p.m. to go to a second job. Afterwards, a coworker agreed to drive him home.
He's catching a ride with one of his coworkers, and he purchases beer and cigarettes at a convenience store.
When he returned home, he discovered that normally the mother would have the porch light on, but on this particular day, the porch light was off.
He also noticed that the side door that he goes through wasn't locked. It opened right up when he went in. So when he goes in, he's already suspicious of what's going on.
That's when Kelvin says he discovered the unimaginable carnage.
So you live in the home with the 3 victims, correct?
Brian ain't living there, he just stayed there.
Does anyone else live in the home?
Yeah, Carissa kids stay there, but they currently with her father for the summer.
Okay, I know it's been a hard night, but we're gonna need to confirm some things. So can you give us the numbers of your co-workers and the names of your co-workers and the name of the convenience store you stopped by?
Meanwhile, crime scene investigators make a discovery that gives everyone pause about Kelvin's story.
During the investigation, they found drugs in Carissa's brother's room. Carissa's brother doesn't have a perfect history and had some problems with drugs.
Many times when drugs are present, that causes people to act violently.
Kelvin, you haven't been totally honest with us. We found the cocaine in the bedroom.
Yes, man.
Have you had any drugs today?
No, nothing like that, man. I've been at working all day. Look, I told y'all that. Look, you gotta understand, man, I would never hurt my mother or Carissa. Not one single hair. Look, I told y'all I was at work. Y'all don't believe me? Y'all can check with my coworkers. Heck, if you can even go to the convenience store and ask them, they'll confirm everything I'm telling you. And they'll tell you I'm telling the truth.
At the convenience store, they were able to find surveillance footage and to actually see Carissa Ellison's brother in the store purchasing items, just as he stated, beer and cigarettes.
Investigators spoke with co-workers of Carissa's brother. He worked the evening job. So everything that he said was true, and his time was accounted for.
People can be by what he has seen in this home.
However, detectives can't help but wonder, could this triple homicide still be drug-related?
This could have been a drug deal gone bad, where it just so happened that the 3 innocent bystanders in the house were slain because of some issue that maybe Carissa's brother may have had with other people that are involved in drugs.
Do you owe any money to anyone for drugs?
Or maybe you ripped off someone that they take revenge.
No, nothing like that. Why are y'all asking me all these questions, man? Look, all this is because of Brian, not me.
Police looked at Brian Wilson himself as someone who might have brought in an unsavory element to an otherwise peaceful home.
Brian, he was incarcerated. He'd been released. What happened while he was in jail? What happened with his lifestyle? Could have been someone there trying to get a vendetta against Brian.
Owed somebody some money.
While Shreveport police continue to look into ghosts from Brian and Kelvin's pasts, investigators receive word that the autopsies are complete, but the findings are not what they expect.
It was someone who had a grudge. This is a deliberate act that you want them dead. You want to make sure that they're dead.
Less than 24 hours after the bodies of Carissa Ellison, Irene Ellison, and Brian Wilson were found inside their Shreveport, Louisiana home, detectives still suspect drugs may have played a role in their murders. Now, investigators have received word that the victims' autopsies are complete, but the findings are much different than anticipated.
Apparently, the victims died from stab wounds, not from gunshot wounds.
It was a shocker. We had gone a good 12 to 14 hours thinking that it was gun violence.
News of the stabbings changes the nature of the murders and raises another chilling possibility.
Shootings, okay, yeah, that's kind of random, but when you take the time to stab people, that's personal.
While 78-year-old Irene had not been able to put up a fight, defensive wounds found on Brian Wilson's hands and arms indicate that he had struggled against his assailant before succumbing to his injuries.
He was fighting. He wanted to live. He really was trying to save Carissa and her mom.
They noticed that he had something under his fingernails, and so they were able to scrape them to see if there was any sort of DNA evidence.
While Irene and Brian each received a single stab wound to the heart, Carissa's injuries are even more grim.
Carissa Ellison has multiple stab wounds to her neck, chest, and back, and obviously she has an extreme amount, more than the other two victims in this case.
It was obvious that she bore the brunt of the killer's outrage.
Now suspecting Carissa may have been the killer's intended target, investigators begin interviewing neighbors in the hopes of learning who may have frequented the Ellison home.
Excuse me, sir. Shreveport PD, do you mind if we ask you a few questions?
No, go ahead.
Do you know the Ellisons?
I know him pretty well. My wife's good friends with Carissa.
Detectives determined that Carissa had a few male friends. They didn't always know the extent of the relationships, but they did know that Carissa had male friends.
Yeah, there were always a few men hanging around. I guess she was pretty popular.
Do you remember any in particular?
There was this one. It was a cab driver. He was a real nice fellow, and was always helping Miss Irene around the house. He lived out back in the shed for a little while. I think his name was Tommy.
One of the individuals that was mentioned to the police was Tommy Lee Wilson.
When was the last time you saw Tommy?
Well, maybe a few weeks back.
The news that Tommy Lee Wilson had allegedly visited the Ellison home within the past few weeks piques detectives' interest. On July 22nd, detectives sit down with the 57-year-old cab driver for an interview.
We'd like to speak with you regarding Carissa Ellison. Yeah, I read about it in the paper. It broke my heart in two.
We hear you were close to Carissa and her family.
Sure. I lived in the back of their house for a while. That was until Carissa's man got out of prison.
Tommy Lee Wilson told detectives that he had never had any interaction with Brian Wilson, and that some time had passed since he had even been to Miss Irene's home.
Where were you on the night of July 18th?
Man, my brother's been sick. He's been in the hospital. I was there with him by his side from July 15th to July 19th. But I want to help y'all out.
Tommy tells detectives that Carissa had been seeing another man behind Brian's back while he was incarcerated. That man's name was Daniel Powell.
Carissa told me that Daniel was real jealous of the relationship with Brian, especially after they hooked back up.
He was insinuating that, this other boyfriend that she's had, you need to look at him. He possibly, could be the person that killed her because he's jealous.
Tommy's statement to detectives raises a red flag. Could Daniel Powell be the man they're looking for? After collecting samples of Tommy's DNA, detectives track down Daniel and bring him in for an interview.
We need to speak with you about your relationship with Carissa Ellison. We should talk on the phone every now and then, but, it's been a while since I've seen her.
Where were you on the night of July 18th?
I was at work.
Daniel provides police with his co-workers' names and numbers. And like Tommy Lee Wilson, he also agrees to submit a DNA sample.
At this point, Daniel is certainly a person of interest, but they have nothing to hold him on, so they have to let him
go. Investigators have to wonder, have they just cut loose an innocent man or a cold-blooded killer? As they're about to find out, desire and passion sometimes make strange bedfellows.
That was no ordinary shed. That was a place for intimate secrets.
Detectives investigating the triple homicide of Carissa Ellison, Irene Ellison, and Brian Wilson in Shreveport, Louisiana, are only certain of one thing. 41-year-old Carissa Ellison was the killer's key target.
Killer obviously had a particularly strong hatred toward Carissa.
So far, detectives have interviewed Tommy Lee Wilson, a family friend of Carissa and her mother, as well as a man Tommy claims had a relationship with Carissa, Daniel Powell. While both men have professed their innocence, a new piece of evidence is about to surface that could provide a crucial clue to the killer's identity.
During the crime scene investigation, they recovered a bloody produce bag from the trash can.
The plastic produce bag appeared to have a palm print on it.
It's not just a palm print on this bag. This is a palm print in Carissa's blood. Carissa would have had to have been killed, and she would have had to have bled, and he would have had to put his hand on her blood and touch that bag.
While investigators wait for a possible match on the palm print, they continue canvassing the Ellisons' neighborhood in the hopes of learning new information. It's a move that soon pays dividends.
Hey, mister, how you doing?
Fine, how are you?
You mind if we ask you a few questions?
No, I don't mind at all.
Thank you very much. Do you know the Ellisons across the street?
I know the Ellisons.
Have you seen anything strange or anything unusual going on over there lately?
Actually, I had seen a man sitting in a car looking at the Ellisons' house. How long has that been going on? It's been going on about a few weeks now.
It's very creepy to think that someone is stalking you from across the street in a cemetery, of all places.
But just who was this mystery man seen spying on Carissa and her family? As detectives dive into this question, they receive a surprise visit at the police station.
Hi, I'm Gwendolyn Myers. I need to speak with the detectives regarding the Ellison murders.
Come on in, have a seat.
Thank you.
She was a good friend of Carissa's, and she knew of a confrontation between Carissa's brother and an ex-boyfriend that she thought would be relevant to the investigation.
Would this ex-boyfriend be Daniel Powell?
Oh no, this was Tommy Lee Wilson. The very man that purported to be a close friend of the Ellisons had in fact had a relationship with Carissa.
She knew that Tommy and Carissa dated, but she would see Tommy bringing her to and from work.
According to Gwendolyn, the relationship began when Carissa's boyfriend, Brian, was doing his one-year stint in prison.
It was during this time that Tommy had helped construct this shed in the back of Carissa's home and had even lived there for a while.
Inside those walls, Carissa and Tommy's passions ran wild. But Gwendolyn says as the months ticked down to Brian's release date, Carissa had an epiphany.
Carissa realized that she still had feelings for Brian and that she wanted to rekindle the relationship when he was released from prison.
Tommy.
Gwendolyn says it was just days before Brian's release when Carissa broke the news to Tommy.
I just want to let you know that my ex-boyfriend is getting out of prison, and I still have feelings for him. And he's gonna need a place to stay.
I understand. I can move back in with my brother.
Okay. I hope we can stay friends.
Of course.
Gwendolyn states when Tommy moved off the property, Brian moved right in. Then, about 6 months after Brian's release, Carissa and Brian's passionate reunion came to an abrupt end.
Tommy literally cut the cord that supplied power to the shed, in turn basically denying Brian, all the comforts of a home that Tommy himself built.
And it's at this point the stalking begins.
The news of Tommy Lee Wilson's ongoing infatuation with Carissa is troubling for detectives. And there's still the issue of his alibi.
Police had questioned Tommy on his whereabouts. He claimed that he was visiting his brother in the hospital.
The detectives actually spoke with Tommy Lee Wilson's brother and asked him about the time frame that all of this took place, as well as Tommy Lee Wilson's whereabouts.
Detectives determined that he was there, he left, and didn't return until after 9:30. That absolutely left him enough time to commit the crime.
But it's what Gwendolyn says next that really grabs the detective's attention.
Not too long after the murders, Gwendolyn ran into Tommy and talked to him about what happened.
During this conversation with Tommy, Tommy seems saddened as well. He seems affected by it, but he's also offering really intimate details about the bodies. This is information that was not leaked to the media. No one's ever heard of this. The fact that he was able to give intimate details to her caught her not only off guard, but scared her.
And that's not the only part of Gwendolyn's conversation with Tommy that raises a red flag with police.
When she referred to Brian Wilson as Carissa's boyfriend, Tommy Wilson became very, very upset.
His demeanor completely changes in his attitude, and the way he reacted made her kind of, take a step back.
Detectives are now all but convinced that Tommy Lee Wilson is their killer, especially when they receive word from Daniel Powell's co-workers.
You had an alibi, and his alibi checked out.
Daniel Powell wasn't near the home at the time of the murders. He was at work. He was completely ruled out.
Investigators feel they're one step closer to unraveling this shocking case. But the next piece of evidence may be the most important of them all.
I think he thought that he covered his tracks, but he didn't.
A week after a triple homicide rocked the city of Shreveport, Louisiana, detectives have learned two tantalizing pieces of information about Carissa Ellison's former flame, Tommy Lee Wilson.
First, there were allegations that Tommy had been stalking Carissa for weeks prior to the homicide. And second, Carissa's friend and co-worker, Gwendolyn, told detectives that Tommy had shared gory details of the crime with her. Details that were never leaked to the media.
Detectives are quickly able to realize that Tommy Lee Wilson's story is not adding up.
But despite strong circumstantial evidence pointing to Tommy's involvement, investigators need another shoe to drop before they make an arrest.
The DNA results could make or break this case.
Michelle Verano with North Louisiana Criminalistics Laboratory is tasked with analyzing the evidence.
There were substances recovered under Brian Wilson's fingernails that indicated that he had been involved in a struggle prior to his death.
So the fingernail scrapings were consistent with being a mixture of two individuals. The minor contributor was consistent with being Brian Wilson, which is expected because that DNA was taken directly from him. The major contributor in the mixture was consistent with the profile of Tommy Wilson.
As for the bloody palm print found in the Ellison's trash, testing also links it to one individual.
In this instance, Tommy Wilson touched the liquid blood and left his print behind.
Armed with the new evidence, investigators move swiftly.
Tommy Lee Wilson was arrested on July 26, 2013 for 3 counts of first-degree murder. We were relieved, that he was off the streets because everybody was in shock. I think that allowed everybody in the Moortown neighborhood to be able to sleep better at night, that knowing this man was off the street.
It was a sign of relief. We didn't have to watch over our shoulder anymore now that they had to kill her.
On July 7th, 2015, almost 2 years after the bloody triple murder, Tommy Lee Wilson's trial gets underway.
Prosecutors told the jury that this was a case of basically jealous rage, and that Tommy was obsessed with Carissa, and that he stalked her and eventually killed her and her family.
Tommy Wilson was feeling displaced because, here you are, you're the guy that Carissa's dating, and then when my dad comes back on the scene, you're out the picture.
He probably saw Brian as a replacement for him. He's literally living in the shed that he built, that Tommy built.
Lead prosecutor Gia Prudhomme puts forth her theory of events.
Tommy Lee Wilson had been watching Carissa. He's familiar with the family. He knows their comings and goings. He knows when Carissa's brother goes to work. He watched and waited until he felt like people were getting into bed. He entered the home. And I believe that he found Carissa and Brian in the living area.
At that point, prosecutors believe Tommy went to attack Brian and they got into a scuffle. Carissa runs out of fear and Tommy ultimately stabs Brian.
He then goes after Carissa and attacks. He starts stabbing her, and by this time, Irene is alerted. She hears the noise, goes to check it out, and he forces her back into the bedroom.
He hits her on her head. He ties her and stabs her and kills her because she's the only witness. The most powerful evidence that was presented was the bloody palm print, the blood belonging to Carissa, and the fact that the palm print was that of Tommy Wilson.
Tommy's defense team, however, has a different take on the state's evidence.
Well, it seemed like a shotgun approach for the defense during certain parts of the trial. Why his handprint was on the bag. He brought groceries to them sometimes. What he was doing in the house, why his DNA was there, was because he actually was there.
Then on July 8th, 2015, Tommy Lee Wilson decides to take the stand himself.
Tommy Wilson's story was, I wasn't there, I had nothing to do with this.
During the cross-examination of Tommy Lee Wilson, he confused himself and couldn't even keep up with the answers he had formally given.
I think he thought that he was going to be able to finagle his way out of it. But the more he talked, the more he made himself look guilty.
Following closing arguments, the jury retires to deliberate Tommy's fate.
I want to say the jury took maybe about an hour, if that long.
Verdict was guilty. 3 counts. First-degree murder.
He was given life in prison without the benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence.
As for the events that culminated in this tragedy, it serves as...
Và đây là Weibo. Yeah. Không phải hả? Đấy coi. Nó về đây. Ôi trời, có tao nhắc thời gian này. Đồng. Ống nhọn. Ống. Phải biết thôi. Bài đeo. Sắt. Cối đầu. Ở trong cối đầu này là cái gì? Cối đầu thô. Vấn đề là đâu mình làm cái gì? Sắt sẽ xíu anh này. Đá quậy. Không biết em người ta sẽ không biết. Về nhà, trên mạng cũng có thể chủ được. Người ta sẽ chủ gì? Mệt thật đấy. Đá iốt. Đất đài nào. Nước này. Mình phải đào được vàng cơ. Cái này không cần. Nó phải kiếm được chỗ nào nó đáng được. Mày giỏi. Thôi đấy chơi nữa. Lãi rồi rồi. Trời, tưởng cách nào. Trời, tôi không cơ mà. Thắng thật mà. Thua đâu. Thắng đây này. Bạn hài lòng luôn. Không chơi nữa rồi, ăn đồ ăn rồi. Không. Xịn đấy.
Chịu không ơi, không bắn được.
Ôi. Bây giờ cái nào sợ này. Trái. Nếu mà ấy bạn anh đấu sĩ, đấy là anh ăn làm sao được. Nhưng mà rồi lần đấu sĩ nó cũng phải hết. Thì đấy có khác. Có thằng em ơi. Kéo đào về đấy, đào đây đào chết nắp nháy. Đào chỗ nào được anh cũng biết gì em không ấy đâu, không hay đâu nữa. Sao sao? Hả? Sao lại như thế? Đấy, tiếp tục rồi, sao không chơi như thế nào? Làm thì vẫn đứa nào làm thì tối mình nó vui cho anh đi không ăn cơm mình chả có món được. Em ăn gì vậy đó? Thắng đi chợ đi. Mắc lời, gặp bó xôi. Hay nóng. Hay rồi. Nóng thì đột chết dần. Nó làm gì? Tôi lại đây con thì ăn giả với chó thì lông lá bạn nhiều không phải mình lá không biết đó là chị bảo mày lại còn đòi lại ăn gì đang ăn không nó bác ăn có lá hạt kìa làm một hai thì ăn làm đông thì ăn đấy mỗi hạt đi nước lá tôi ở lại nhau với ăn anh cứ tức của anh để cửa em lên đấy thì đơn giản thôi. Cái đấy thì cứ rán nói chung là tốn dầu thôi, còn